which means I'm responsible for advocating on your behalf on a number of issues. One of the biggest issues that we face right off the bat when we come back to school is the decision about tuition rates. So, because of the way that the federal student aid works, we decide our student tuition very early in the year. So typically, in years past, it's done very late into the spring semester where we've had a lot of time to consider what our budget's going to be. We've had a lot of time to discuss what a potential rate might be, what we're going to spend the money on. But because of the way that federal law has changed, we have a much earlier deadline. So a lot of the questions that we received online had to do with what are we going to spend this money on, why are we doing this, kind of specifics on what our plan is in the budget. And I just want to let you know off the bat, we will not be able to discuss much of what those questions are pertaining to because we don't quite know what the budget's going to be yet. That discussion doesn't happen until March and much later. It's a conversation with the Board of Regents, it's the conversation with the President in terms of priority, and there's a whole lot more work that goes into that conversation. But for today, what we really want to know is what a potential increase in tuition means to students. So obviously, we all know, and I know as a fellow student, that nobody wants to pay more in tuition. I have yet to hear a student tell me that they would love to pay more in tuition. I don't think I will meet a student that tells me that. But what we want to know, and what can be more helpful for the decision makers in the room, is how does this affect students? What does this mean? Does this mean you have to take on a second job and now you can't be as involved on campus? Does this mean you simply can't go to UOP anymore because you can't afford tuition? Does this mean your family is taking on significantly more stress because the loans are just overburdening? What we really want to know is how does this affect the lives of students? And I think that's what would be most helpful at this point to focus on and most helpful for us to communicate to the decision makers in the room is what this will mean for students moving forward. So I'd like to introduce our panelists that we have up here. Starting on the left, we have Ken Mullen, who's the VP of Business and Finance at the university, aka the CFO of the university. We have Sharmila King, who's a professor in economics, and she is also the chair of the IPC, which is the Institutional Priorities Committee. You can think of that, aka the budget committee at the university. We have Annabella Betancourt. She is our staff representative. I think she's right here or there. And she's here on behalf of the Staff Advisory Council. So my hope was that we could get somebody to represent sort of each section of our university. So we tend to think of our university in terms of administrators, staff members, faculty, and students. So we have a representative from each of those groups. I understand most of your questions will probably be more directed to Ken, as he's the CFO. He can answer more questions related to tuition rates and why they are where they are and the sort of context. But our other representatives up here can also answer more specific questions to their areas of how these increases will be affecting their particular colleagues. And obviously I can answer in terms of students. The forum will basically be a short presentation from Ken. He's just going to run through what he presents to us on the IBC, maybe slightly different. And then we're going to basically just throw it over to a Q&A, and we'll take your questions, and we'll do the best we can to have just a civil conversation about how we intend, or if we are going to increase tuition, what that will mean, how that affects students, why we think it's justified, why we may or may not think it's justified, and hopefully it'll be just a good conversation. Obviously, as a fellow student, I understand how important tuition is to some people. We sent out a survey this morning to students, asking them for their feedback, asking them how this affected them, and I can't tell you how many students responded to that survey saying that an increase in tuition would be such a burden on their life. It would be such a burden on their ability to continue to attend University of the Pacific. And I understand and I sympathize with that. And I think today we can clear up a lot of misconceptions related to the affordability of college sort of nationwide. We can kind of clear up some financial aid questions potentially. But above all, we just hope to share we hope to be sympathetic to everybody's situation. And I certainly know I am, and I am fairly certain that the people up on the stage are as well. So we'd appreciate honest feedback. We understand how sensitive this can be to people, and we just hope it'll be a good conversation overall. And I just wanted to end on saying that it's very important to be involved. Obviously, I am your representative to the administration on a regular basis, but nothing can replace students directly speaking up. I do my best to tell the administration what I think is on the minds of students, but there's no more direct way to hear what's on the mind of students than hearing from the students. So that's why we put this form together. We wanted to get some direct feedback. We wanted to know what you all are thinking. We wanted to know what you want to see from your administration at the university. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Ken. He's going to do a quick presentation on the tuition rates, and then we'll kind of just go to a brief Q&A session. Thank you.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. What I'm going to do is kind of start at a high level and go quickly through a number of slides that will hopefully give you a little better understanding about tuition rates and financial aid and kind of where things have been and where we are today. What I want to start with here is just to let you know the overall financial condition of the university is pretty strong. We want to keep it that way. Accredited agency, Moody's credit agency rated us A2, stable, which is pretty good for an institution of higher education our size. So financially we're pretty sound, but we want to make sure we remain that way, and it's very important that we're vigilant about that every year as we begin to develop the budget and as we look at tuition rates. We have to balance affordability with our financial stability. Just to give you a sense of the revenues of the institution and where they come from, you can see that almost 80% of our revenue comes from tuition, and then 11% comes from auxiliaries, which is housing and dining and those sort of things. So, but we're a very tuition-dependent institution. Many and almost all private schools our size are, but tuition is what really makes the finances here at the institution work. This is a history of tuition and fees since 2010, and kind of what the tuition increases, that top line, if you will, and that line under the blue percentages of what the tuition increases have been year over year. Excuse me, for graduate or undergraduate and graduate tuition. And you can see that for a number of years we were at tuition rates of 5, almost at times over 6% early on this chart, and those then dropped off to about 3.9 for a number of years, and then this last year was 3.7 for the current year we're in today. Let's talk about, we call it discount rate. This discount rate is really the financial aid that comes out of the budget. We have two primary sources for financial aid. One is just kind of a straight discount. We fund it right out of the budget, the financial aid. That's where most of the financial aid actually comes from. And then we have money that comes out of the endowment, which is money we invest. It spins off income each year, and we give that to students for financial aid. And you can see the reddish line, or the darker line, is University of the Pacific. The gray line is the national average. The darker line is all undergraduates. And you can see what's happening with the discounting, or the increase, if you will, in financial aid, that since about fiscal FY15, you've seen this curve going upward as the discount rates have been increasing because affordability has been challenging for a lot of families. All across the nation, you can even see the national average has been climbing right along with University of the Pacific. So as tuition has gone up, so has discounting, actually at a faster rate than tuition increases. I talked about the endowment and that spins off scholarships for us. And the main thing I want you to take away from this is that the donors that give money to the university for scholarships for you, they have done just a phenomenal job giving financial aid, endowed dollars. You can see the slope since 2011 going very, very steep. So that funding is a very important source for financial aid, and is growing very, very nicely, which helps us make, again, give you more financial aid and make affordability better for you to attend the university. So we're doing a lot of work to increase financial aid, both on the budget side and the endowment side, for affordability. This chart here shows how many dollars per student, roughly, for undergraduates come to the university. The blue line is new freshmen. In other words, how much per student does the university actually receive after financial aid is given. Okay, because we have to pay the financial aid. And you can see the blue line, for example, that the actual dollars the university is taking in per student, per undergraduate student, is actually dropping. Since 2004, or fiscal 14 to fiscal 18, there is a slight drop in that number. And for all undergraduates, you can see it was going up and it's starting to now plateau off. While at the same time, there is inflation out in the economy. We have wages we have to pay, those are going up, medical benefits are going up, so we have costs going up, but yet our net revenue per student is about flat, which of course, if you do the math there, is squeezing the budget some, okay? So where do we fit in relation to other schools? Well, we compare ourselves to a number of different schools and their tuition rates as we begin to talk about if we have to do a tuition rate increase, how do we compare and what will that do relative to us compared to other schools? Are we being reasonable in what we're doing from that perspective? And you can see that we have what we call the California 8 schools. You recognize probably most, if not all, those names up there. And you can see where Pacific falls in that list of schools. So we're third from the bottom, we're about $2,000 under the average. So we were kind of positioned there, and you can see what the percent change was for this year we're in today for all these schools. So you're seeing a range of tuition increases from 3% up to about 4.4 for the year we were in. Ours was 3.9, tuition and fees. Here's a graph of the same data. So Pacific is that orange line. How about compared to our peers nationally? Schools that are more or less like us, we have a set of peers, and we look at that, and how do we compare? We're a little higher on that list. One of the reasons we're higher on that list is the state we're in. We're in California. It's an expensive state to operate in for any business. And you can see that those top 4 or 5 universities are all in California. So it's priced a little higher here, but that's how we are compared to our peers. And there's the graph of that. Again, the orange line is Pacific. And then we have what we call aspirant peers, schools that have probably more money than we do, many times more higher enrollment than we have. And you can see where we fall in with those schools is just below, or just above the average there. So that's kind of where we fall within the market in California and nationally with our peers. And there's a graph of those tuition rates as well, with us being the orange line. So that, oops, I got some other slides here. Yeah, we also ran that net tuition per student for graduate students. That's a little harder to calculate, but you can see that's flattening off. And then if you look at our professional programs, which are dental, pharmacy, and law, you can see where those net tuition amounts per student are, in George's case, the law school going down, and then some increase in pharmacy and dental. So those are the graduate program, our professional programs. Okay, and that's my overview of tuition and kind of where we are in the market. And so, Grant, I'll turn it back over to you.
So we're going to start off with a very common question that we got from that survey I mentioned earlier that we sent out to all students. Over half the 250 students that replied had stated in some way or form that they would struggle to stay at the university if the tuition were to increase. And most of them followed that statement by asking simply, why does it have to increase? And what needs to be done to prevent future increases, and what are we doing today to make sure that we can lower those increases in the future, was a common question amongst those people.
So, good question. And so, what happens when tuition increases? What do we do with those dollars? So, one of the driving factors at the university, we are a people-oriented business. All of you are here. You're taught by faculty, there's staff supporting the academic programs. There's staff helping run the trains, if you will, behind the scenes. So it's very people intensive. 70% of our expenditures are in wages and benefits. So that's a big percentage of our expenditure base. Wages are going up around 2 to 2.5% a year. So 70% of our expenditure base is going up by 2 to 2.5% a year, no matter what. Otherwise, if we don't do that, we lose people. We can't hire people. We can't hire faculty to teach your classes or keep them. The other thing that goes up coupled with that are benefits. Medical benefits in particular. They're going up on average around 7% a year. And so you take the benefit costs and you take the wage costs, and that's, I don't know the exact number, but probably north of 3% a year, that just that part of our expenditure base, which is a big part, is going up. And so we have to, remember the revenue chart, that most of our revenue comes from tuition. The primary way we have to fund those increases and to keep excellent teachers in the classroom is we have to raise tuition to cover those wage increases and those benefit increases. So that's one area. The other area, another big area, there's many areas, I'm not going to go into them all, but another really big area is facilities that you use that are very important to you. Those are high priority to us to try to improve and keep to a standard that is acceptable to you and that you can enjoy. The new housing facility is one example of that. We are soon to start a renovation on the library. These are all student-facing facilities, but we are really challenged to keep up with, as facilities get older and older, to keep up with keeping them modern. It is expensive to do. Construction here in the state of California is very expensive. So, but we really try to give priority to those student-facing facilities that you use on a regular basis. So those are a couple of areas where we spend a lot of the tuition rate increase as it comes in.
We will now turn it over to, I should have mentioned this in the first place. I'm going to try to switch back and forth between questions in the audience and questions that we received from folks that couldn't be here. I also want to preface by saying we are recording the forum for those who weren't able to attend it in person, so if you prefer not to be recorded, if you ask a question, please let us know. We will stop the recording until you've finished your question. That being said, I think we have a couple of ACOP staff members that will be on either side and come by and give you mics, so would anyone like to ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tala. I'm a graduate student here at the University of the Pacific, and I have a question in regard to the, I believe, Dr. You mentioned it was a 70 or 80% of our tuition, or excuse me, of the tuition from the school or the income from the school comes from tuition. That's the right way to say it. I would like to know from that 80%, is that where exactly from what schools is that tuition or is that funding coming from? Because we have also the dentistry school, we have the pharmacy school, we have the law school. What's the breakdown in terms of who's contributing to what to that 80%?
So I don't have the exact breakout for you on that, but if we just look at the number of students in the schools, for example, many of you are probably in the college here. That is the biggest unit at the university and brings in a lot of tuition, what we call gross tuition revenue. You can kind of swing over to another big school is dental, and the tuition rates in dental are quite high, and there is no discount, there is no financial aid there at the dental school. So a lot of that's a big chunk as well. And then you have kind of a descending order from there with the other schools. But those are the big ones, if you will. Pharmacy's big, obviously. A lot of students there. Not necessarily a lot of financial aid going to pharmacy students either, very little. And so that tuition revenue coming from pharmacy is quite large. Those are kind of the bigger ones.
And Ken could probably speak a lot more to this than I can, but the way that we budget at the university currently does not lend itself as much to knowing exactly which programs in specific are bringing in the most revenue, but we are exploring, or I should say they are exploring some options in which you can budget on a basis that shows you the revenue per unit, and it can allow you to be a little more strategic in how you're planning programs and how you're expanding your university to make sure that those programs that might bring in less revenue, like the program I'm in, political science or religious studies, can be balanced by a program that might bring in a lot more revenue, like dentistry or the pharmacy program. So, to my knowledge, the university is looking into a way to budget in a manner that would make that more easy to see. Another question from the folks that answered our survey, they asked, won't raising our tuition make us a less desirable university to prospective students? Many students responded that they would transfer away from our university in the event of an increase, and they wanted to know why they should stay at Pacific given these annual increases.
Well, I'll start. I think that one of the challenges we have, I talked about this balance where we want to keep affordability at a reasonable level for our students, but we still have to pay some of these costs we talked about earlier, I mentioned, and we also have to be able to reinvest in ourselves, again, facilities, invest in programs, equipment in the classroom, all of these things. So if we stop investing in our people and in our facilities and in our programs, we'll also become less desirable. And so we have to be careful that we're kind of moving with the times. The world is changing, and you all know that as much as anybody. And there's new fields all the time, new ways, new types of positions of employment out there, new careers that are developing, and we have to stay abreast of those things and invest in ourselves, as well as careers that are evolving in place. I think we have to be careful that affordability doesn't make it less desirable, as well as us falling behind times doesn't make us less desirable too.
I would say we also have to make sure that those additional revenue that we bring in is being invested in those things that are most desirable to future students. I think Ken mentioned previously, there's a number of facilities on campus that we all know, we go to class with them every day, or we lack them in the first place, that we would like to see on campus. We need better hangout space on campus, we need better classrooms, we need updated classrooms. Some of our buildings on campus are simply just inadequate. I think Ken mentioned is our housing as well is in desperate need of improvement. So, I would say if we are going to increase tuition, make sure that we're investing in those things that are most important to students.
I'd like to add something as a faculty member in economics. And, why should you choose Pacific? Well, the reason why is because of us. We spend a huge amount of time with you. We want you to grow. We love being with you. We are very much dedicated teachers, and I have some of my students already, I can see in the audience. And so Pacific is very much people-intensive, relationship-intensive school. It differs from other schools. We're not at UC. I'm at UC. I wouldn't even know half of your names because there's 500 of you in the classroom. The difference is here, I know all of my students' names, and we were mentored, we become your friends. I mean, my students now from the past, they're getting married, having babies, which is making me feel really old. But, we keep up with you for the rest of your lives. So Pacific is slightly different from other schools. So I just want to add that. I also want to piggyback off what Ken just mentioned. He was talking about, the fact that our expenses, and of course, with any business, our expenses per people, it's basically labor costs. If you take an econ class, I can explain all this stuff to you guys. But our labor cost for any business is approximately 70% of all costs for a firm, on average, right? And so you can imagine, as Ken mentioned, our salaries have to go up 2%. Our Federal Reserve targets the rate of inflation, which basically tells us how much each month we have to spend money in order just to maintain, like pay our rent, food, whatever. That goes up 2% per year, so that's what our Fed targets, and that's why Ken was mentioning that salaries have to go up simply to keep up with the cost of living. So that's where that 2% is coming from. But obviously, our healthcare, well, that's another story. You guys see all the national politics on all this, right? With the whole healthcare situation, it's dysfunctional. It's increasing by more than the rate of inflation. So that's really where a lot of the labor expenses are coming from. But anyway, going back to the original, why I choose Pacific, it's because we build this long-lasting relationship with you guys, and we really do care.
Just to add, in regards to staff and representing SAC, I mean, we care about all of you. I'm very passionate about Pacific. I believe in Pacific. I believe in each of you. I help our students all the time. We do things, we're doing things differently. I don't know if there's any, I know there's a new freshman here, but anyhow, we do something new for our freshman students that we have never done before, and it was to help their families prepare for the expense of Pacific. We did an informational invoice, and I'm part of making changes for our students, because again, we understand as business, this is a business, but we also care about our students, and we want to make sure all of you are successful, and that we do have scholarships to help and so on. So again, on behalf of SAC, we understand both sides, and we're in it together. And I think that's the biggest thing for all of us to understand: faculty, staff, students. We're here for each other. Without our students, and without faculty to teach, and without staff to help, we won't have a university. And all of us are passionate about Pacific. So we just want to keep that in mind and always be positive. I'm always a big believer about thinking outside the box. I went to a CSU, so completely different. And I understand, I mean, when I became in my business degree and had that upper division, I did have, 28 students in my class. My professor knew me by name, but not the 14, 15, 16. That's what sets Pacific aside, and that's what makes us the best that we are. I just wanted to add that.
I'll just make one more comment about use of tuition dollars. We try to be very wise on the incremental tuition that does come into the institution. So I'm going to give you an example. One of our passions of the work is to try to be as sustainable an institution as we possibly can be. So how do we do that and not spend more tuition dollars and drive up tuition? So we look for creative ways to do this. This is a simple way, but just to let you know we're acting on it, is we are going to be putting solar panels over a number of the large parking lots. Now, we are not paying a dime for that. We've entered into a power purchase agreement with the company. We're going to get a fixed utility rate. They're going to supply about 40% of our electricity from the sun, and here in the campus here in Stockton, and also save us a substantial amount of money in our utility bills, especially in the out years as utility rates rise and our stays fixed. So we are constantly trying to do things in a more sustainable way, an affordable way, and even saving money. And so we're constantly looking for those thinking out of the box ideas.
Yeah, I also say, to kind of close on that question, another common theme to the question about why do we pay, like why stay Pacific. A lot of people would contrast the amount you pay to attend Pacific as opposed to a state school. And a lot of the comments we received were, well, it only costs $8,000 to go to CSU Sacramento. Why should I pay, $48,000 to go to Pacific? Well, I think it's important to recognize, first of all, that the state schools are funded through tax dollars. So you may not think you're paying for those schools, but you actually will be. We all will be eventually when we pay taxes. And it's like comparing apples and oranges, right? Like Professor Dean talked about, you are paying for a different experience. It is completely different animal you're dealing with. The way they're funded, everything from the way they are governed to the way they are funded is entirely different. So I understand from a competitive standpoint as a student who doesn't really care how things are administered, they really only might care how much am I paying, how good of an education am I getting, and what ranked school is this. It might appear that we just charge way more than these other institutions, but you have to keep in mind that get such different sources of funding in there.
Good evening. My name is Giancarlo Zarga. I'm a freshman here at Pacific. Professor King, sorry. You and also as the ASUP president, you mentioned how Pacific is different from CSUs, UCs here in California. One of the worries for me about raising tuition is running into the problems that the UCs and CSUs have in California. A lot of the schools in California have a large number of students, and a large number of them come from wealthy or international backgrounds because they can afford to pay full tuition, while other people who may not receive enough financial aid or just do not have the money to go to those universities can't, and they choose to go somewhere else out of state, or they choose not to go, or to go to community colleges, something like that. And for me, the worry is if UOP is raising its tuition, we run into the same problems where we only get people from specific backgrounds, specific socioeconomic statuses, and I chose Pacific because of its environment, and also the cost was cheap for me. Luckily, I got scholarships that helped me with that, but otherwise I probably would have gone to a UC, and I don't think I would have had the same experience that I had here already, and I've liked it here. You mentioned like class sizes being different, the professors and the staff being very friendly and wanting to engage with you. And so I don't want to lose that aspect of the university to a lot of people who can afford it, and that kind of, there is, and though we want to accept a lot of students here, I know there is a cap to how many people we can take into the university. So kind of my question is that, and my worry is just raising tuition, would that cause, or is the danger of that causing the lack of opportunities for other people who come from my type of background?
I think that's a very, very important question, and one that I've raised before on the IPC. So as Ken mentioned, discount rate is a very crucial percentage to the university, right? How much aid are we giving out? A big part of financial aid is that it allows us to have a very diverse student body, which is something we like to talk about a lot, right? Because we do have a very diverse student body. However, if we want to keep discount rate where it is, but increase tuition, that makes it harder for us to have a more diverse student body in terms of socioeconomic background, like you're saying, right? Because if we can't give out more funded aid and we're raising tuition, it becomes more difficult. There are other avenues. We are raising money through a campaign to set up endowed scholarships. There are a number of ways we will ensure that we continue to have a diverse student body. But to your point, it does get more difficult as we increase tuition if we aren't in a position to increase financial aid. So that's something as students I think we do need to keep bringing up, because that is something I hear a lot from my fellow students in terms of why they want to come here, because of the diversity of our school, because of the socioeconomic diversity of our school, the ethnic diversity, whatever particular type of diversity. We are a very diverse campus, and we want to remain that way. And to do that, we do need to make sure that we are being very careful with how we are raising tuition if we are not planning on raising the discount rate as well.
So, several things from your statement. So, Pacific, as you guys are very well aware, we're very diverse, and in fact, we rank really highly. I don't know if you know about the Equality of Opportunity Project. You should go to the website, and basically it looks at social mobility. And so, you know, if you're in the bottom 5%, you know, how likely are you to move up to the top 5% in terms of income, right? And we rank number 7 of the California universities. So we rank really highly on social mobility, and I know this is basically, you know, a mission of our universities to focus on our students and to focus on our diversity. It's all part of our academic mission. So that's one thing. So we will always focus on that, I'm pretty sure. The other thing is, yes, the other schools, the UCs, the CSUs are cheaper, and I actually happen to have inside knowledge on this. My husband, he's an econ professor at a CSU, San Francisco State. I can tell you that the average graduation time, the minimum, is 6 years, because they have many impacted classes at the CSUs and UCs. So actually, when you look at the total cost of Pacific education, you're comparing it to some of the CSUs and the UCs, because it takes longer, it's not actually as cheap as you think it is. Does that make sense? You know, we're dedicated to our students, and diversity is part of that education.
We'll take another question from the audience, if there is one.
Hi, my name is Ahmed Ahmed. I'm a junior here at Pacific. I'm honored to be here tonight and to actually meet you, sir, and for to actually speak to you and for Annabella to be here. But I'm kind of concerned about something. We're all here tonight. Majority of us are students. I just want to know, how serious are we being taken in this case? I mean, we're going to express our concerns. We're going to express about what we're concerned about going forward and how we're going to finish off our degrees. But then, to what extent, how far do we go? You know, like how far in the decision making does our voice go? I mean, that's just a concern to me. I'm not really too sure.
So as your student representative, I completely agree in terms of it's very important that our concerns are taken seriously. As Annabelle mentioned, none of us would be up here without each other, right? Obviously, as students, we're the ones putting the bill, but also if we don't have professors, if we don't have staff, if we don't have administrators, then we don't have a university. So we're all codependent. So it's very important that we all listen to what each other have to say, because we're all in this together. So I do get a seat on the university's budget committee, right, as I mentioned previously. So I elevate the concerns that I hear from students straight to the university's leadership. I think often people feel that they are not being listened to, or their voice isn't having an impact if what they ask for doesn't happen. And that simply isn't true most of the time. They are listening. The president of the university is here. The vice president of student life is here. The vice president of business and finance is here. We have professors here. We have staff here. The provost is here. Clearly, people, the leadership of our university is deeply committed to listening to students. But as Ken mentioned at the beginning, there's a number of factors that are simply out of our control. Healthcare is going up. We have to pay people a fair wage. So there are certain things that I won't say are out of our control in terms of there are other levers we can pull, but they aren't. It's not the fault of anyone. It's just the reality of our situation. So I think it's just important to recognize that despite us raising our concerns and maybe not everything we ask for happens, that doesn't mean that they're not listening. That being said, I do think often I hear from students on campus express their concerns to me, but they don't express their concerns to the administration. Like I said, I tend to be the one student that's constantly talking. I like to talk a lot. And I like to talk a lot in a lot of these committees, and I'm sure President Ibeck is well aware of how much I like to talk. Because I'm a politician, apparently. So I did my best. I challenge you to find an administrator that has not heard a mouthful from me at some point in my tenure as president. You'd probably be pretty hard pressed to find one. So I did my best, and I'd like to say I've had an impact on some of the decisions that have been made. I do deeply believe that the voice of students has an impact. But I think we have to be realistic and measured with what we expect. We're not just going to get what we want. And I'm not claiming that that's what you think. I'm just giving context in terms of I do believe us being here is having an impact. Speaking up and saying what we feel is having an impact.
I would just want to follow up on that. In fact, it's exactly the same thing. We absolutely do listen to you, and we absolutely do take to heart exactly the financial strain that it might place on you. But the bottom line is, we have to pay our bills at the end of the day, and these healthcare costs are out of control. So we absolutely listen to you, for sure. So please believe that.
So if I could just take a minute and give you a little kind of bird's eye view into a budget committee meeting. So we have in there a number of faculty, 5 I believe, we have staff, Grant is in there, and I have to say he brings into that meeting a clear and intelligent voice and advocates for you every meeting. And not just the faculty, the staff due to Annabella is not on the committee, but we have staff from her council that are on there. And most of us in higher education are working in higher education because we love the mission. We love you guys. We want you to succeed. That is very, very important to us. And from a business standpoint, it does us no good if you don't in the long run. And so there's that interest as well. So we do listen very carefully, and the debates we have in the budget committee around setting the tuition are very serious and deliberative, and everyone gets a voice. They're also very civil, but very strong points are made on all aspects of the tuition rate, and we do hear them.
I'm sorry, I have a few more questions just to ask, I'm sorry. But that, I understand, I completely understand. But I come from a low-income background myself. So I understand the struggles of trying to find the means to go to college. It's a privilege to go to school nonetheless, and it's a privilege to go to UOP. But with our costs continuing to go up, like healthcare, 2.5% every year, with that increase in tuition going up, I think you said it was 4% every year or something like that, how are we going to manage? Because it's going to continue to go up. How are we going to manage to invest into our programs like disability offices? So far, I've been at Pacific now for 3 years, and I've not seen a change with our disability department on campus. I hate to say it, the guys that work there are great, but there isn't much of a resource there. The resources that we brought forward and we talked about it, they're not being offered, and it's been 3 years. That's kind of a long time to kind of leave it on the back burner, and it's been there for quite a while, far before I came here. So that concerns me as to how, okay, we understand health insurance goes up, costs go up, our electricity and our bills, at the end of the day, we have to pay those, I understand that, but how do we get back to investment? And then for the other departments on campus, such as athletics, such as all the other different departments, how do we keep them on a budget? Because if they go over by a certain amount, somebody has to pay off that tab at some point. How do we keep them on a budget? That's what I want to concern about, because I don't see that the concerns that are affecting me personally, or several other students, because I've seen that the amount of students that have registered for accommodations with the disability office have increased over the past few years. How are we going to keep up with that?
Okay, so I can speak to the first part of, how do we keep up with the rising costs? Because you're right, if we do absolutely nothing, then it's unsustainable. So what we have been doing at the university under the strategic plan is growing new programs. And I happen to teach, well, I used to teach one of those new programs, but because I have to be an econ, they just want me there. But anyway, that's another thing. But I used to teach in data science. It's a brand new program. It's a hot field, right? All this data analytics. So we have created this new program on the San Francisco campus and on our Sacramento campus. And I was one of the faculty members, and so I taught on all 3 campuses. And so what we're doing is we're creating all of these new programs to attract students, programs for the future that our economy, basically, because everything is data-driven these days. I joke in my classes about Alexa, spying on me and everything, but they're collecting data all the time. Everything is data-driven. And so we at Pacific, we are responding to the marketplace, and we're creating these new programs. And so that's where the growth is going to be. So I can speak to that part. So that's what we're working on. Rather than continuously raising tuition year after year after year, what we're trying to do is basically attract new programs for the workplace that's in demand. So that's one of the points.
I think to your point about investing in vital services like services for students with disabilities, I think it kind of comes down to a double-edged sword, because we don't want to pay more to go here. At the same time, we want everything to have more resources. So from the administrative point of view, they're kind of looking at us and saying, well, we don't understand. You don't want to pay more, but you want a much better experience, which is possible. It's a better management of our resources, but we have to be realistic in terms of if we are opposed to these increases, if we are opposed to paying more, then we're going to have to be more conservative and more purposeful with the resources we currently have. So, just yesterday in IPC, we were looking at outlooks for potential revenue 5 years from now, given different percent increases, right? If we go with a certain percent increase, like a higher percent, we're going to have a lot of money left over in the bottom line down the road. That means we can invest more in our campus. That means we can improve our housing, but it also means we have to pay more to go here. So if we believe we need to start paying less in tuition, that's fine. I personally would agree with that. But that does mean down the road, we have less revenue at the end of the day. That when fiscal year closes, we have less money to invest in housing and those services. So it is it's kind of a zero-sum game in terms of your resources, right? You have to be careful. So that all I would say on that piece is, I agree we need to manage our current resources better, but it is a bit of a double-edged sword when it comes to not wanting to pay more, but also wanting more resources. I think that Ken wants to.
Yeah, just real quick, and there are resources, ADA resources that we do have allocated, and we do invest all of those and beyond every year. It'd be great to hear what those priorities are. I don't know right off the top of my head what you're talking about. I assume you met with the disabilities office about these. Physical plan, I don't know if there are facility issues, physical plan reports up to me, and we'd be glad to hear what those are and work with disabilities, see where we can fit those in if possible in the funding we have.
We're going to move to another question that was submitted online real quick before we go back to the audience. I believe someone recently in a question mentioned athletics overage. There was a number of students in the survey that asked about athletics. Many are concerned that the $4 million deficit that we had last year is primarily responsible for our tuition increase this year. They want to know, or really the question is that true? And what, if it's not true, what has the impact of that deficit been on our finances? Because, as the student pointed out, the money doesn't just come from nowhere, right? Clearly it had to have an impact on something. So I don't know if you want to comment on sort of the consequences of that deficit.
So, when that occurred, obviously it was a very big problem, and we are addressing that, just so you know, very aggressively, and driving that down to a balanced budget. Next year, the budget will be balanced, and so that deficit is coming way down. That was basically, we had to fund that out of the budget, the reserves of the university, primarily the reserves of the university. We didn't use that as we modeled tuition rates for this year. We didn't use that number to go, okay, well, we've got to cover that out of tuition increases. We really paid that out of reserve. So that is not the case, that we charged you more to cover that deficit. And again, we are driving that down to zero as quickly as we possibly can. We have to keep in mind that some of that was also financial aid given out, and we can't just pull that back immediately. We have to keep in mind those students that are in school relying on that financial aid as athletes too.
Hello. Oh, jeez, that's loud. Hello, my name is Henry. This Q&A has sort of fallen into the same pattern that previous budget meetings have, which is someone stands up, says, I or someone that I know can no longer attend this university if tuition continues going up at the rate it does. And then the people in the front talk about healthcare, they talk about wage increases, and they essentially give us justifications for why the increase needs to happen. No one here is actually feeling heard as a result of that, right? One of the core values that the university put out last year was student-centered. The university and the administration like to talk about shared governance a lot. It's nice that we have President Ibeck, who, I don't know if she's still here right now, oh, you are, President. So we have President Ibeck and Vice President Mullen and representatives from the faculty and staff here. To be completely blunt with you, this feels like hollow lip service. You know, I hear every single time, we value your input. Just because you don't get everything you want doesn't mean nothing is being done. I'll be blunt with you, President Ibeck, Vice President Mullen, I don't believe you. And I think a lot of people here probably feel the same way. All right? Yes, we understand tuition needs to go up every year. We understand healthcare costs. We understand wage increases. I have friends who have dropped out of this school because of tuition increases. That has not been addressed in any meaningful way up here. All right? You say you listen to students, okay? You show up to an event. What have you done as a result of student voices? Please name something that you have done financially with the administration, with tuition, that has substantially changed as a result of student input. I know tuition last year was not the case. I know Grant lobbied very hard. President Ibeck eventually did make a recommendation as a result of that. That didn't happen in a budget forum. That didn't happen with tuition. We need something, because this is lip service that at the end of the day doesn't do anything.
Because I'm just going to be going to my
Okay. Well, so the thing here is that we do have a business to run. I mean, that's what this ultimately is at the end of the day. It's a not-for-profit business, but we have to do that. And so what are we doing to drive down costs? What are we doing to drive down your costs? Well, I showed a chart up here for one example where the endowed aid for students has gone up. So 5 years ago, it was a little over $3 million. Now it's 10. Okay, we didn't cut the budgeted financial aid as an offset to that. That was on top of that. And we're driving that in the campaign we're in. It's a $300 million campaign. That is the major thrust of that campaign, is to provide resources to you in the means of financial aid and to the academic programs of the institution. So that's kind of one area that we're really working hard in trying to increase affordability. I will also say that budgeted discount rate that has gone up from below 40% to now 47%. Let's call it 10 percentage points. It's about $400,000 a point. That's $4 million. That's coming right out of the budget to help you attend school. So these are purposeful things that we have done to try to make this institution and your experience here affordable and less worrisome. So those are a couple of things that I can think of right away that we've done.
Okay, so, do you have a question? Okay, so I was just going to go all econ. So the first thing we talk about, the first thing of class is, we have these fixed resources, and they're really limited. And there's nothing I can say to you guys right now that is really going to make you feel better in terms of increasing tuition. Does that make sense? Of course, individually, all of you have, your own financial situation, and so we actually do hear it. It's just that we only have a limited resource, and so if we don't increase tuition, then what should we give up? I guess is what I'm asking. Does that make sense? So,
So I definitely very much can relate to the frustration. Again, it feels like lip service that obviously we come here and we speak. I think what is often the case is that students don't hear about what is being done. I certainly realized when I first stepped into this job how many things went on at this university that we just never get exposed to. The work that's done by various committees, the work that's done at high levels amongst the administration. So I'm not going to stand here and say that I believe that they've done absolutely everything that I think they should, but I do think students often don't hear about an immense amount of work that is done by the administration after hearing the comments that are made at forums like this. So do I think that the communication from the administration to students could be a lot better? Certainly, and I think they have gotten a lot better in the last few years. But I think communication is always a critical piece, and I think following up on these concerns is really important. I think students want to know that their administration is taking what they're saying seriously, so we want to hear specific follow-up on the questions that we ask.
So one other thing, Grant reminded me. So Grant has been pounding the pavement for some time for us to build here or to create what we call third space. That space for you to hang out in, enjoy each other's company. We don't have a lot of it here at the university. We want to have more. So I'm the financial guy. We build a new housing project. Now, from a financial standpoint, I want to put as many rooms in there and beds in there as I can, okay? Being honest, that generates revenue. You look at that whole first floor, and we had a big debate about this, and a lot of that in Building 1, a lot of that is third space. Space we do not get revenue from. And so we try to do, for example, a project like that with you in mind, not just finances in mind. And to make that project financially viable, we squeezed the contractors and the architects until we could get that space available. It took a long time, a lot of effort, and so we do have your interest in mind. That project is a perfect example of that.
Hi. So something I've thought of, and a lot of people we've talked about this, is, every year tuition can be raised. And I came here 4 years ago, and I'm here because I'm not going to be here next year, so I don't have to worry about the tuition that increases. But I'm grateful for the experiences that Pacific provided me, and I don't want people to have to leave the university and miss out on those experiences, right? So my question is, I came into college with the idea that, okay, this is how much tuition costs, and this is how much financial aid I'm going to get. But while my financial aid didn't change across the years, my tuition increased. So how do you help students with that? Because it's a thing. People are leaving the university, and at the end of the day, say my tuition is $50,000, and I have 50% of that paid for by the university, and tuition increases to I'm just using numbers right now, but into $60,000. So instead of me thinking, okay, I'm only going to have to pay $25,000 for 4 years, that's $100,000. Each year, say it increases by $2,000. So my second year, $2,000, third year, $4,000, fourth year, $6,000. That's $12,000 more dollars of debt that I wasn't expecting. So I think my question really is how does it benefit the university to lose a student? So you're losing that $25,000 of income in, say, their second or third year coming here, so you just drop them because they can't afford what they were expecting. There has to be some middle ground, right? Has that been looked into? How can we fix that? Because I don't think someone would come here and take out loans for 2 years thinking that they wouldn't receive a degree at the end of their time.
So there are a number of approaches that can be taken. I know something that I think we're looking into, it may or may not be, but at one point we were talking about, it's called cohort pricing. So basically what you say is the year that you come in, that's considered a cohort, your tuition rate is locked as a cohort, and then you pay that same rate your 4 years. The next one after that, they pay their fixed tuition for those 4 years. What that typically means is that the jump in tuition from cohort to cohort is a little more significant because if we're paying the same, they're going to average out what a 3% increase would look like, basically try to put that in your first years because you're paying the same rate. So that is one option. There is sort of efficacy on either side of that. But I do think at minimum, if we don't go with that strategy, that we do need to be more honest in how we report the cost of attendance to students. Because I think now more than ever, particularly our generation has lived through a very tough financial era. In the 2008 recession, we have a number of events in our lives that have led to a lot of mistrust of financial institutions. And we're not exactly excited at the prospect of paying a lot more for things that we didn't intend to, considering that the amount of debt we're taking on for higher education is almost a mortgage at this point. So I do think it is important, if we're not going to do cohort pricing, that we are honest to people and are saying it is likely that your tuition will increase. You should plan for that. It shouldn't be a hidden cost that we don't talk about. It should be something we're honest about, because I think what new students are looking for is honesty in cost of attendance. And I think it won't scare people away. It'll make them feel more trusting, because when we talk to our friends, our younger siblings or our younger friends that are applying to colleges, we're telling them, hey, they're not going to tell you this, but you're actually going to pay more to go to college. Don't believe the number you see, right? So if we're a transparent and proactive university in terms of how much it costs to be here, I think that does a lot for people. I think it can do a lot to further the trust that students can have with that institution.
And just to speak or to add on, I actually work very closely with financial aid, and I can just share so many examples, which again is a great school. So again, if we work closely with our students, look for scholarship opportunities, figure out maybe, you can't pay the whole amount, obviously, but maybe payment plans. There's options for our students. It's just the earlier we educate their families, because again, our students, they depend on, it's family members now. It's not just mother and father paying for their education, because again, it's a huge investment. It's, maybe grandfather. I work with students daily, so I see what, out there experiences, and that's why at my, when I went to a public university, it was very different. I never met a business office. I never had to. But I always feel very passionate about our students, and I want to keep every single student here. Again, if you come and talk to us, financial aid, student accounts, business office, there's options. It's just come and talk to us. I think that's the biggest and easiest way to explain to help. There are scholarships and other aspects that can be assisted with our students. And again, keep in mind, you talk to your friends, and that was actually very impressive when that student told me, I chose Pacific because you guys gave me the best package in scholarships and financial aid. So thank you, financial aid, for that.
So I think, kind of speaking for our vice president in the room here, and not me, the other thing we have to do, and your point is well taken, is that we have to look at how we're communicating about aid and also how we're delivering it. I think we can do better there in our delivery and our communication and nuancing it in ways that is most helpful for the individual, because all of your situations are unique, and we're trying to do that more and more, but we have some work to do there. And so hearing from you is good on that point. So we can make a difference in an area.
And just to kind of add, I know just recently School Vet, they had a huge donation, and I always talk to students, if you're a junior or senior, there's possibilities. You talk to your school to see what options you have with scholarships and applying for additional help.
I would also mention that a lot of the feedback we got also talked about if tuition is going to go up, is my financial aid going to go up? I do think it's important to know that percentage we talked about, the discount rate, is an average. So it's not that every student that comes here is getting a 49% discount. Those with the most need are getting that financial aid. So those who are most likely to not be able to attend their university anymore given an increase are the most likely to get additional financial aid if there is an increase. If that makes sense. So we do our best, but I do think this is also an example of something we do at our university that can be improved without adding resources. This is one of those examples I was talking about before, that we don't want to pay more tuition for better service, and that can kind of, that can be very difficult in some areas, maybe building a new facility, but in other areas like maximizing our services to students and student accounts and financial aid, that could be a matter of changing the way we practice our business, and that doesn't necessarily require more resources, that's just a matter of changing how we do things. So I do think that's something that students need to speak up about. If you have a bad experience in the financial aid office, if you have a bad experience in student council, or if you have a good experience, make sure you you report back on that. Make sure you let the administration know about your experience so they can improve those processes so that students have a better experience here. Because unless you speak up, then, how are we supposed to know? I think we have another question.
My name is Robert Andrews. I'm a freshman economics major. I'm really solution oriented. So when we talk about the future, I desperately think that this university needs to innovate. You guys were talking at the beginning about seeing which areas we can improve on. So increase. So does the university's ability or future ability to see what areas are causing the most strain economically, or which areas are going to be the most beneficial economically, mean that we can target those areas in the future instead of just having flat out increases or flat out cuts across the board, and would that actually help students?
Yeah. So a number of years ago, I was not here, I don't remember the exact year, the university underwent a reduction in their spending to create what they call the Strategic Investment Fund. And they've since used that fund to invest in new programs that they believe could bring growth to our university and bring additional revenue. I believe off the top of my head the requirements of the program are that whatever new program is created through that fund has to be revenue sustaining within, I think, 3 years. So we have invested in a number of new graduate programs that we didn't have before, as those are the fastest growing areas. So I do think our university is innovative in some ways. Do I think we need to be more innovative in a lot of other ways? Yes, I certainly think, as I said before, I think there are practices and processes that need to be improved that could make our university more efficient. But I would say, in terms of innovation, that University of the Pacific is actually a leader amongst a lot of our peers in terms of investing in our future and being strategic about where we want to end up. But that can mean there are some adverse consequences to those programs that we might not be able to afford in the future. So we do want to remain a liberal arts college, but it can be very expensive to afford those programs that don't bring in the amount of revenue. So we have to be careful what we do in the name of efficiency, because sometimes there are programs that we believe should be part of a liberal arts college, but they might not be the most revenue-centric or efficient, if you will.
I think too that we always have to be looking at how we can do business better, administrative side. Because we're overhead, right, to the institution, and we need to be driving those costs down if we can. So, for example, and there are a lot of areas we can improve that in, but there are areas we could have improved a while ago on, and we're trying to catch up in some areas. So, for example, I don't know how many of you in here are student workers and receive a paycheck from the university, but just recently, in the last year or so, we went to electronic timesheets. Okay, well, there's institutions that have been doing that for 20 years. And so we're working very hard now, looking at those systems, going, why are we doing it that way? Why can't we do that better? Or why are we doing that at all? And it'd be good to hear from students about services. Are there services you're receiving that maybe you don't need or are a high priority and we're sinking a lot of money into, thinking you do? That's why your feedback is so important. So we are looking at those things on an ongoing basis. They take time to improve, but we're working on it every day.
I think we had a question over here.
I have a question. Hello, my name is Emily. Nice to see you all. So I wanted to start by saying I'm very grateful to come here. It's an opportunity of a lifetime to come here. I hear a lot from a lot of my friends who went to my high school. I'm going to UC San Diego, and that was actually one of the other schools I was considering. And they have 600 people classrooms, and I can't imagine that. So I'd just like to preface this by saying I'm very proud to be at this university, and I appreciate this university. And at the same time, there are a lot of concerns I have, the first of which being what Hannah very eloquently put, which was it's very frustrating to see tuition rising, but not, at least from the student perspective, I don't see any real efforts to increase financial aid. I mean, I know you mentioned the upperclassmen grant, I think, or like there's something that if you're upperclassmen you can apply. Did you listen?
A little bit. There's actually scholarships that were created for juniors and seniors if you were in the school then. So that was just someone that donated recently back to the university to help and promote the future of education.
Okay, thank you. But one of the things that's frustrating to me is that I know it's not intentionally presented like this, but it feels dishonest as somebody who signed on to 4 years at supposedly this tuition, and then it increases. I know that's not how it's intended, but it feels dishonest to me. And then additionally, housing. So you mentioned that 11% of the revenue, correct, is from housing. Auxiliary, and that includes a lot of housing, yes. And it's frustrating to me, so I lived in Southwest, which I don't know if any of you administrators have taken a second recently to go through Southwest. I lived on the first floor. There were 10 rooms of girls. There was a shower, 2 showers. Oh, Shamari was there with me. If you want to ask us about it, can later. There were 2 showers with closed, like curtain showers, not even doors, 2 toilets, and 1 sink for 10 rooms of girls. And I actually was lucky enough to be in Greek life the next semester, and at that house I had a room as 2-3 times big as that. We have a personal chef, we have great facilities, and it was a full $2,000 less a semester. So, and that's a housing that we own our own house. So it's very kind of telling to me that that's the price difference, and the quality is unbelievably different. Now, that's not a plug to go Greek as much as you should go Greek, but also just kind of showing how much we pay for housing, but how much of it is not continuously put back into housing, and that's a huge frustration for me, especially as a student who doesn't really know where that money goes. Does it go like somewhere kind of in student life? Does it go to the farm school? Not that there's a way to necessarily track all that, but that's another one of my frustrations. If you could kind of address if there's any kind of innovative solutions that you guys are doing to also address, oh, that was my last point, sorry. During your presentation to the Senate, which thank you for coming to that Senate meeting, Ken Mullins, I was doing the calculations. If we kept on going at 3% for the next 2 decades, by 2041, our tuition, just tuition, would break $100,000 every year. And by that time, if I had kids, I would never, ever, ever, ever pay $100,000 for 1 year just for tuition for my kid to come here, no matter how great the education is. So I hear that we're growing new programs and we're doing things, but the thing that concerns me is this normalcy, the attitude of like how normal it is to increase tuition. And as somebody who actually pays that tuition, the attitude seems to be that like it's just extremely normal and it has to happen, that this tuition increase has to happen at a certain rate. So if you could kind of delve more into what innovative strategies that you're implementing to kind of not go at that steady 3.74% rate, because it's really not sustainable for 2 decades.
I'll let Ken talk about the housing piece and sort of the outlook, but on your first thing you mentioned about the promise of a 4-year completion to degree, that was also another point that we heard from a lot of students in the survey and the feedback that they shared, which is that a 4-year promise isn't much of a promise if the deals of the arrangement or the circumstance of the arrangement is going to change while you're there. Right, so it's, you can finish your degree in 4 years, but what we didn't tell you is that it's going to get more expensive while you're here. It kind of feels like, especially from a student standpoint, you can't really go halfway into your degree, right? You're 2 years in and then the tuition goes up. You kind of have to keep going at that point, right? You already invested in the institution. You can't just pull out after 2 years or else you've wasted all the money you spent up to that point. So I would definitely echo that concern in terms of being honest and transparent about that promise. I think it's a great promise to have that you can get your degree in 4 years, but we have to make sure that that promise isn't just in terms of the academic classes you need to take, but that you can afford to be here for those 4 years as well. I'd like to touch on the housing piece if you want.
Yeah, so the university is kind of like a big ship that it takes time to turn, and you don't want to make abrupt turns or too large of turns too quickly. Because sometimes you don't know what the unintended consequences may be. And so, 2 points on that. One, relating to your last point about the 3% per year and getting to 100,000, that's obviously a concern for all of us. So we believe that is probably unsustainable. And so what do we do about it? Well, we're going to have to somehow get ourselves into a position where we don't have to do that. We're doing that by growing revenues, new programs. We're also going to do that by becoming more efficient. But we can't just all of a sudden turn that on a dime. Just like a big ship, we've got to move into that gradually as best we can. Otherwise, we could really damage ourselves for a long time to come. But with a long-term goal in mind to drive that down, we surely can make headway in that. And to what degree, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But the other point on the housing, the same sort of thing in that when you have a facility, and I mean that all the housing facilities, you have a big asset there. And you have to maintain that. They're expensive to maintain, and you have to keep them modern as you go along. You have to do that. And one of the things that we haven't done, my son was in Southwest when I came here. I had the same experience when I walked in as a parent that you probably did. I was surprised. And it was obvious that we had a lot of work to do in housing, and it probably had not been done all along as it should have been. And it wasn't renovated when it needed to be renovated. So now we have a fairly substantial problem that we have to deal with at a difficult economic time. And so we're doing that. We have a strategic plan for housing. We're going to roll that out as best we can. We've done phase 1 across the river, and phase 2 is coming up. We have to find a way to finance that. It's not cheap, but we know all these residence halls need work, and they are very high priority. It's just they're also very expensive, and it takes us time to get those resources.
Hi. So one point that I haven't heard brought up yet is, granted, I feel that is a less common point, and that is that Pacific is, while it is a very wonderful institution in many ways, it does not necessarily address the concerns of people who, for whom, especially in terms of graduate education, Pacific may not be the best choice. I myself am looking into applying to PhD programs next year, and I see a severe lack of resources directed at those students who are searching for PhD programs specifically. This manifests specifically, I can give an example, in the math department. There's a severe lack of upper division classes that are offered at times that are convenient. And some of those courses that would normally be offered at UCs that are very common in preparation for PhD level studies are not even offered due to budget cuts. I know of 2 courses off the top of my head that had been offered in the past by current professors that can no longer be offered due to budget cuts to those programs. And I feel very, I guess this is the part where I vent a little, I feel very, I guess, upset that I will be having to pay more money for something that I do not expect will address my concerns, seeing as I am currently having to go out of my way to forge my own path and find all these things myself, because it almost seems that sometimes that Pacific is not really looking out for my best interests. In this case, they're trying to pull me into what Pacific thinks is best, and for me, I know, especially given that Pacific is not a research institution in most departments, if you want to do PhD level research, Pacific just does not have it, but it also doesn't have the funds to direct students elsewhere, or it doesn't have the resources to direct and prepare students to go elsewhere. So what can be done?
Okay, so I can't speak to the whole class offering thing, but I can speak to the research part because at least the faculty that I know, we do independent studies, research studies with our students, and then we have our students present them at national conferences. And so for any of you guys who want to work with a faculty member on research, you should just approach them, and you can, if you have a topic in mind, that's wonderful, or if you need some guidance on a topic, then you should be talking with your faculty member. But, absolutely, I mean, you should just go approach your faculty member. But like I said, I have 2 right now going on, so just, reach out to your faculty members and we work with you. So I don't know what's going on but just reach out to your faculty. And given that you're in the math department, if you're applied math, you don't have to just do stuff in the math department because, economics is pretty much applied math. So you could do something that kind of is econ related. All I'm saying is you should go reach out to your faculty members. So that's the bit I can speak to.
As to the sort of availability of graduate programs or PhD program resources, maybe is kind of what you're getting to. I do know the university, like I mentioned before, is looking into the strategic areas where they foresee the most growth, and I do know a lot of growth is foreseen in continuing education for adults, which primarily is graduate education. It's my knowledge, I could be wrong on that, but from what I recall, it's a lot of graduate education. Not sure about PhD level education, but definitely graduate. So I would expect as we move forward, we'll see more of a focus in those areas. I think traditionally UOP may have not gone into that as much as it did before, but I think we're kind of trying to forge our path into that area. I'm sure the provost can talk a lot more about this than I could, but all I'm going to say is I know that's an area of concern for the university. It's an area of strategic growth, and I'm sure if there are students that would like to with Conver University and those programs that we will be looking into creating those programs in the future or expanding existing resources.
Okay. So, first of all, again, thank you for being here today and for listening to us. But I would like to vent. I've been at this university for the past 4 years as a pre-pharm and now as a pharmacy student, and to be honest, I haven't seen that much change. Besides the fact that the athletics department was able to overspend by $4 million, and that was allowed, and that happened, that doesn't make sense to me. At this university, if we're saying that 80% of the costs or the funds coming from the university is from tuition, and as a pharmacy student, I'm paying $250,000 to go to this curriculum. With the other two classes, that's around $150 million that's coming into the school. Yet we were able to build new tennis courts, but we couldn't upgrade the bathrooms in all the buildings in the chemistry department and labs. Those are horror halls. Those are scary places, and they have not been upgraded to state-of-the-art facilities, which we should have for our science departments. In addition to the fact that our students are feeling, well, for example, for myself and for my peers, we feel that the university isn't providing the students with the best academic abilities and resources. We have, our libraries are still very old. In addition to the fact that Dr. King, you mentioned about improving, or by adding new programs to the university to bring in revenue. But what about improving our current programs? Our pharmacy school right now is actually lacking. University of California, Irvine is going to be having a pharmacy school, and right now a lot of students are interested there than UOB. In addition to the fact that our school the expense is pretty similar to all the other universities for graduate school, but we're not seeing any of the funds. Our rotunda is old, it's disgusting, the bathrooms are horrible, and yet we don't have state-of-the-art facilities in the pharmacy school. As a graduate student and a professional student and a healthcare professional to be, I expect more from university, and if I'm paying high amounts of money, that's what I'd like to see, not on tennis courts. Because as an undergraduate student here, to be honest, I never attended athletic games, and a reason of that was there is a stigma, and the stigma is our athletic department is not the strongest in terms of our sports teams. We're not UCLA, we're not USC football, we're UOP, and we're really amazing with our academics. We're really great with that, and a lot, especially with our pre-pharmacy and pre-dental programs. To be honest, I didn't know UOP until I knew about those two programs. And the fact that coming to the school and seeing that these programs in our academics are not being treated right, but athletics gets to overspend, and that gets to go by and fine. We can't get upgrades at anything else in the university. That doesn't make sense. That's not fair. My money should be going towards there and helping the professors also, making sure they're getting paid right because they have families and also their healthcare, not for buildings that we don't need. In addition to the housing, I have a lot of friends that were in dorms, and they were frustrated with the fact that athletic students got to have their Luba Commons subsidized to $300 to $350 a month, where they have to pay full price around $800 to $900 a month. That doesn't make sense. That's not fair. Especially when you have your academics being your strongest goal at this university, not your athletics. And you also mentioned about cutting back or looking about things to cut back at. Well, I mean, of course, athletes are important, and they are important for our school and for advertising, and they also have the ability to go and be the NBA, to be at NFL. They have great potential. But at the same time, it's like, I feel personally that the university puts a lot of funds and focus towards them and giving them the benefit of the doubt and giving them a lot of resources. They don't pay for books, from what I heard. We have to pay for books. I just paid $200 for an electronic resource that I'm going to barely be using. And that's not even part of my $250. So I feel very disappointed with my university, and a lot of and it's kind of sad. I have friends that are in high school and they're asking about joining or coming to UOP for pharmacy. To be honest, I can tell you, I haven't been having a great time here. It's sad and I hate it, but I love my professors, and I'd love to see better results. We expect a lot from the university, and we love that the university give back to us too. So thank you for hearing my complaint, and I really hope to see change in the future. It sucks that I won't be here to see the change in the next few years, but I know one day it'll make a difference. So thank you.
I completely agree with many of the sentiments that you just spoke about, and I ended up writing a pretty straightforward op-ed last year that described a lot of my feelings about that overspending. I do think it's important that we're careful when we hold people accountable, to hold them accountable precisely for what really happened. So I would be careful not to say they were allowed to overspend that money because they weren't supposed to. It's not like they were empowered to do that, and the president's plan was weird, right? So the processes that allowed them to do that have been changed and eliminated, and the way that they are held accountable is very different now. There's a change in leadership. Certain people were let go that allowed those things to happen. Does it excuse what happened? Absolutely not. But does it show that our university takes our concerns very seriously and has changed the manner in which they do things? I think so. I also think there's a lot of misconceptions about athletes on campus for a few reasons. They're very recognizable, first of all, because they have their jerseys on. So they're kind of, they kind of stand out in the classrooms. It's sort of easy to take on and identify. And they get a lot of things that other students don't. But typically, those things aren't coming from your tuition dollars. They're coming from donor university can continue to bear the expense of athletics. That we're also careful not to be unfair to our fellow students, because a lot of those students wouldn't be able to get their education without those sports programs, and we don't want to accuse them of the wrong things. But I do think our administration really needs to consider whether we can keep paying for those things, considering we do have all these other things that need to be fixed. We have housing that needs to be fixed. We have all these other things we need to invest in. But we do need to be accurate about how we complain about athletics, because I think the problem is if we're not, our comments can kind of be dismissed as people that don't really know what's happening. So we do need to make sure that we're very precise about what we're upset with. So I really appreciate that comment, because I think it encapsulated a lot of feelings that we heard from students in terms of mismanagement of funds that occurred.
The tennis court complex is the Eve Zimmerman Tennis Complex. Also talk just a little bit about student athletes, and I got to be careful, I got to be very general because I'm not super knowledgeable in this area, but our athletes tend to do very well academically, and also a large majority of them receive partial financial aid, or if that, just as the normal student does. Now, we do have athletes that receive, full rides or close to full rides or half rides, but not a lot of them. The vast majority do not. Annabella may be able to speak more to that. So I think we have to be a little cautious about how we talk about the aid they're receiving, because a lot of them don't receive a lot of aid at all.
Do we have a question over here? Next person.
Those universities, and the first thing that I found on Google for San Francisco was their operating budget for the fiscal year, and I could see all of the numbers of where pretty much every dollar is going. These people know exactly where their money is going. They can tell exactly how much they spend on gas and water at this university. And I looked up a few others. I looked up San Diego. I looked at William Marymount, St. Mary's. When I looked at our university, the first thing that I found was an article talking about the athletics overspending, which is really fair. It's not written by us, and I feel like I'm kind of beating a dead horse at this point, so I won't go into that. But the next thing that I found was on our website, but that told me that we're trying to reduce our spending this year by 10%. And I remember you saying that we can't, that we're trying to shift too quickly, or we might have some unintended consequences. But it seems like we're literally turning on a dime here, as 10 cents is 10% of the dollar, and we're cutting our budget by 10% in 1 year. So how is that, is that a controlled shift turn? I don't understand how that works. So I guess my two questions are, where is our budget, and why is it being cut by 10%? Because I love the school, I love the bricks, every last one of them. And I love the faculty here. I obviously happen to have a professor whom I did like, whom I did enjoy staying in the passion with and talking with and learning from. And I want to make sure that our faculty is being treated correctly and that our students are getting their money's worth. I think most people here, a lot of their grievances could be summed up by, I want to know where my money's going. So, I want to know where my money's going. I think that's about what I have to say.
Thank you for that question. So to clarify, your question sort of two parts. One, why isn't our budget as transparent as some of our peers? And two, why are we making such a large shift so suddenly in terms of the budget? Some of it, okay. Well, I can't answer most of that, but I would agree, and I have expressed my discontent with the current plan to the IPC in terms of the sheer amount that we're trying to cut in a single year. I don't think it's strategic. I don't think it makes sense. I think we're waiting for a number of tools that would allow us to make strategic decisions, but I don't think it makes sense to make such a massive cut without those tools. I understand the trend lines. I see the same data. We look at the same graphs, but I do think, to your point, it does not make sense to me that we would do such a large cut in 1 year, but we can't decrease tuition more than 0.2% in a single year, because that would be too big of a turn.
So, let's start with compensation. We'll talk about the reduction now. So, the reduction, the biggest part of it is a reallocation. It's not a cut. Okay, it's a reallocation. I talked about us being below the median in compensation, and we are. And so, let's say we decide to go after that at 2 percentage points a year. Okay, the market's moving faster than that. Okay, so the market just keeps moving away from us as we're trying to catch up and trying to bring our employees and invest in our employees at the market medians for compensation. So that's one reason we need to address the compensation issue rather quickly, and that is the majority of that cut. The other part of that is that our the amount of money we bring in versus the amount of money we spend right now is zero at the net of that. We have no margin at the bottom. What does that mean? That means when Sharmila comes to the IPC and says she needs to invest money in her program, we say, well, see us next year. And so now we're talking about taking care of our faculty. We're not compensating them at the level they should, and nor are we reinvesting in their programs as we should. The other issue with that is reaccreditation. We have an accreditation visit this year. They look at those finances, and they see the margin of the university being very thin, and that raises concern with our accreditation. And the longer we wait on that, the more serious in their minds and in mine that becomes. So, your point is well taken. I think it is quick. I think it is hard. None of us are enjoying this, and you can ask these folks too. None of us are enjoying this, but I believe it is absolutely necessary for this institution. We could move more slowly. It will be very difficult from a compensation standpoint to do that, and again, that being the majority of the reduction. And you also kind of go from the philosophy of, do we just get it done and move on, or do we kind of drag it out, cut 2% a year out of everybody's budget, and every year it just gets increasingly difficult to do that. So there's arguments on both sides. I think it's a judgment call. That's where I landed on my recommendation.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that answer, because I think the way in which you answered that kind of made it sound as if you were handed the situation yesterday, and you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, we need to make this big turn because we need to compensate people correctly, we need a margin. But isn't it true that over the last number of years we've seen the margin narrowing? So why didn't we take action as we saw ourselves approaching this flashpoint? Why did we wait until we're at a 0% margin to suddenly say, okay, now we need to take a 10% cut?
Okay, so over the last 4 years, let's go with that. In fall of 15, we had an average size class. Fall of 16, it dipped dramatically. We did budget cuts immediately because we were going to be in the red. We had to do it right now. Back to your point, did we have to turn quickly? We did. Our margin was going to be, the revenues and less expenses was going to be in the red. We had to move on that. The next year, we about hit budget. Okay, so if you look at those 3 years, we had a downturn which we did react to. The enrollment has slowly been going down. The discount rate has slowly been going up over the last few years. You're kind of watching that trend, trying to control it. Again, we could have reacted more with the cut was 2.5% fiscal 17, we could have said, hey, let's do 5. And then we would be in a different situation today. That'd be true. But we didn't have a crystal ball to say, well, where is enrollment going? And we figured it would go up. It didn't go up as much as we thought. This year, we've had a pretty good year. So now you're asking, I'm asking, well, what's going to happen next year? And we could end up with a pretty good financial statement next year. And then those cuts, well, did we need to do all of that? That's a good question. But I have to look at the long-term trends and the demographics going out in the future. And the demographics right now for enrollment in higher education are not looking very promising. We could have reacted earlier. We did to some degree with that 2.5% cut. Could we have done more? Sure. We just didn't think at that time we really needed to based on the way things were looking at that time. In hindsight, probably should have done more.
Because I don't see a gym fee in my tuition, I'm assuming that it's part of the overall student service, student budget that we pay tuition to support the gym. So my question is, what would be the results if for somehow we were able to if we were somehow able to have the students that use the gym pay for it? Because I know for a fact that not every student uses the gym, and I know that there are other services and there are other projects that I don't use and I'm certainly not aware of. So my question again is, out of curiosity, what would be the results of creating a plan where the students that use for them pay for them?
So currently, the fitness center is in part funded by a fee. It's funny that you bring it up because yesterday we actually just had a conversation about whether or not we should increase that fee. So it's called the activity recreation fee. It should be on everyone's bill that's a full-time student. To your point though about making fees sort of an opt-in system as opposed to everybody pays them. We do have a subcommittee on the budget, the university budget committee that's looking into that and looking into how we assess fees, why we assess fees, who determines how fees are assessed. A lot of students complain about course fees, for example. If they were taking like a lab class, you get that random like $70 charge and you're just sort of like, why? I thought I paid tuition for this. So we are, or I should say, the university is looking into that. As to that specific point about opting in, I think it can be, it's kind of dicey when you get into that conversation because the problem is you want to provide these services for everyone. They are sort of a holistic good for the campus. So if you start letting people opt out of certain things, it's sort of like allowing people to opt out of taxes. Like obviously nobody would prefer to do that, and you may make the case that you use public libraries less than Joe, but we all need to agree at some level that we all contribute a little bit to maintain those services, a diverse amount of services on campus, even though you in particular might not be an avid user of those services. You may be an avid user of another service that I never used, but I'm still going to pay for that. So I think it's a conversation we're having currently, so it's certainly not over, and that's just my take on it, but that the fee discussion is ongoing, I would say.
Okay, sorry, I've been waiting for just a little while, and I just want to bless Kyle for all the bricks joke, because this entire forum, since I got here, has probably been also like an active worker at the school. People see me around campus all the time. And I'm glad to see my staff here. And when I say I'm proud to be here, I mean I'm proud to be in the DeRosa Center ballroom, not so much Pacific, but I'm proud that I was able through struggle time and time again to continue to go here. So one of the first things I want to address 4 things: transparency, financial aid, privilege, and alternatives to. If you don't know, clearly, like maybe you don't deserve to know because you don't have the capacity to understand these complicated words. So that's the first thing. There's not really transparency in the school. There's folks who say, oh yeah, like we're doing all of these like things and comparisons and graphs, and that's great. I'm a psych major. I know about graphs. I know how helpful they can be. But you have to explain those things, and those things are not being explained. Financial aid, I've had an issue with financial aid every single year. It's almost like clockwork. It's like, oh, school's starting, and then it's like, oh, I have to go to financial aid. Why? Oh, I don't know, something's wrong. This year, I almost didn't get FAFSA. And for the past 3 years, include and this one, always had an issue with getting the university to like give me financial aid. And yes, that seems like, okay, well, everyone has their financial aid, and Pacific has the best financial aid package. I actually got free rides, like I got a full ride, not to not like nonsense schools, because I don't want to say that, but I got a free ride to UCLA, UC Berkeley, and Stanford. And that's not to pat myself on the back, that's to say those are the universities that you compete with. Those are the universities that other people have the opportunity to go to. And when I'm smart, and that's why I'm allowed to go here, not because I'm rich enough to pay for it, that should say something. Because I didn't decide that I was smart, you all decided that I was smart. So if I'm smart enough to go here, why not keep me? And that's not just me. I have friends here who are sitting here who have definitely like worked so freaking hard to go here and who continue to work hard to stay here academically. And I also have many friends who sadly are not here. And not because they were any like worse or any less deserving, but because prices mean something to people. And those people were smart enough to come here. Pacific has a 33% acceptance rate. When I got in, only 33% of the people who applied here got in. And I was in that 33%. And I had friends who were in that 33%. So we're smart. But that doesn't seem to matter once you get in, because once you get in, you also have to pay the price. And if you say again, like, oh, well, financially, just come over and like work with us. I've already lost 2 residents, because I'm an RA and I have a lot of my staff here too. I've lost 2 residents already, just because of financial aid. 2 residents on 2 floors of 1 building. What does that say? Are you like, yes, I'm not trying to like point the finger at one of you specifically or any of you specifically. I'm saying look at Pacific as a university. If it's a business, it's acting like a business, good job. But I don't think you should be proud of that. And Pacific like collapsed itself on the back a lot about being a student-focused university. I came here because it's a student-focused university. I came here because it has a small ratio of like students to professors, and I need that to learn. However, if you're going to be a student-focused university, you're not really doing a great job. Pacific claims a lot to, this year there was like a campaign on diversity and inclusion after a long time of having a multicultural center, which still doesn't even get funding that well. Because I work there and I know these things. So Pacific wants to clap itself on diversity and inclusion. And the problem is that you're not recognizing one of the biggest identities or one of the biggest identity factors, and that's financial aid or finances and socioeconomic status. And that's a real identity, and if you want to be diverse and inclusive, you have to include people who can't really afford to go here because they still deserve to go here. I'm sick, I'm not crying, I just want to clarify. So yeah, so the budget and then like making it like put a PDF online, it takes literally like you just put everything on a Word doc and then just post it online. It's great. The last thing, if it's a business, businesses have alternatives to revenues. And I know that because like I've worked for many a business. And my family has worked for many a business and people always work for many a business. Over time, businesses have to evolve to get different forms of revenue. That doesn't mean raising tuition every time. And like many people have said, that we don't need all these things. We don't need that new building, that great shiny new building with a bunch of third space. I feel like the whole concept of third space kind of like went over people's heads because third space is spaces that students create and use like unconventionally. This DUC ballroom, when it's empty, it could be third space. The library, this carpeting, like anywhere, that could be third space. Adding a couple beanbag chairs makes it a little bit better, but students make their own spaces. One of the best spaces to hang out is literally a grove of trees with an art sculpture that was made by students. That's not really seen. And I don't like the fact that I'm an RA in Price, one of the older buildings as well. It's not as bad as Southwest, but it's still like, we don't even have functioning water fountains. What does that say? That with the students who like are paying like a bunch of money that doesn't really need to be used to go here, yes, they live in a cool space. But you still have buildings that don't have like adequate facilities. You have buildings that don't have like water access. We are in California. We are in like one of the biggest states, one of the most liberal and forward-thinking states. And Pacific wants to like be part of that, but only on paper. So what does that say?
Okay. See what I can cover there, and you can tell me what I missed. Back to this gentleman who talked, the overdressed one over here. I forgot to answer your question that she then brought up about transparency. My apologies about that. It slipped my mind. So we are developing and it's already out there, and we did figure out how to get it on our page. The budget information for the university, we're adding to that all the time so that there is a budget website for you to go to. One of the challenges we have about financial data is this. You want transparency, okay? What do you want to know and why? And what are you going to use it for? So we can provide it in a way that's most effective to you. And so that is one of the challenges we have is we put financial data out there, and then someone comes and says, we're not transparent. And we go, why aren't we transparent? The budget's out there. Well, you know, I got to look at it this way, not this way. Oh, well, okay, why do you need to do that? And they explain that. Okay, I get it. And so then we have to massage that data to provide it in a way that's useful to them. So it's very hard for us to be transparent without having some questions answered about what you mean by that. But we are trying, we're building out that website. It is out there now. You can look it up. It is there. And it has all the unit budgets. It doesn't tell you what we spent on natural gas and electricity yet, but we'll get into that point probably at some point. But this is the first year. We just rolled it out. So we're working on it. So we're working on the transparency issue. The other things you're talking about, you know, let's go to your third space comment. Okay, well, we heard quite a clamor last year, in the last couple of years, about there not being enough. And who did we hear it from? We heard it from you. Okay, so we try to respond to that, and are responding to that. And so when I hear that comment, I get a little, I can't connect the dots. Because that's not what I heard from a lot of people, students. So we're trying to respond to your needs and create those spaces and give you the services you need. I think on financial aid, just quickly again, we have our VP here in the room. I'm not a financial aid expert. She is looking very closely at what we have done, why we're doing it, and how to make it better. I do think there's a lot of room for improvement there in many aspects. So I agree with you. And Roberta's working on that. She just arrived, so I won't put you on the spot here. But anyway, very good points. And we need to respond to that and mature that process.